historian, and a lot of times people are shocked when they learn historical facts. But the truth of the matter is, people, most history is not written in the books. Many times you have to dig very deep, sometimes in the memories of old people, and sometimes in musty old newspaper microfilms and libraries. And few are willing to do that, so a lot of history gets lost. Well, here's a little bit of history that I managed to find doing just such research. You see, many people, of course, know the story about Rosa Parks and her not getting off the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and so forth. It's probably the best known story in all African American history. And some, of course, know that the story I told here several months ago about Claudette Colvin, who was actually the first down in Montgomery, Alabama, who refused to give up their seat on the back of the bus, but because of reasons of class and complexion and so forth, she didn't get the recognition that she deserved. There's another video that I have on that subject on my page. But here's something that even fewer people know. Did you know that back in 1867, 88 years prior to Miss Rosa Parks, or Claudette Colvin for that matter, there was a case of a woman who refused to get off of the streetcar because of her color in Charleston, South Carolina's Marion Square? Here's that story. You see, back in 1867, it was the beginning of the Reconstruction period for the former slaves and the newly freed people. And the city was the city had a whole lot of difficulty in dealing with that transition. In 1866, the city of Charleston established a streetcar service. Now, it was not written in law, but it was understood by custom that black people could not ride on those streetcars. Well, as it turned out, there was a mass rally in Charleston, South Carolina on March the 26th, 1867, that was written about in next day's edition of the Charleston Daily News. And among the speakers of this rally, it was held at Citadel Square. The Citadel College and Military School was once located at what is now known as Marion Square, before it moved to its present location in 1922. But anyway, on Citadel Square Park, as it was known then, which we now call Marion Square, many black speakers, including the Reverend Richard Harvey King, who was the founder of Mother Emanuel AME Church and of the town of Lincolnville, South Carolina, as well as Alonzo Ranzier, who would eventually become the first black lieutenant governor of South Carolina in 1870 during the Reconstruction period, that period where African Americans voted for a period of time. Anyway, after the rally, many of the local blacks felt the desire to enjoy their newfound rights as free people. So anyway, one participant who was described by the Charleston Courier of March 27, 1867 as a resident of Meeting Street opposite Burns Lane and a barber by profession, calmly walked onto a segregated horse-drawn carriage on Calhoun and Meeting Streets, driven by a man named Conductor Farber, and sat down among the whites, which caused shock and awe. My goodness, who does he think he is? And so the conductor asked the black man to leave. But a lot of black people who were standing by listening said, "Oh no." He said, "Oh no, that's not right." But others told him, "Look, be sensible about it. Leave for your own safety." And so he left the streetcar. But another crowd said, that's not right. So they rushed on the streetcars, getting seats wherever they could. And so the streetcar conductor stopped the car and argued heatedly with the blacks. And the black men exchanged threats with these guys. So at the same time, other black people forcibly got onto the cars. And the conductors refused to drive the cars until the arrival of soldiers from the nearby Citadel came by and took them off. Well, for several days, this led to a lot of heated, agitated talk. But then, at the same corner of Calhoun and Meeting Streets, on April the 1st, 1867, two black men by the name of Daniel McInnes and Sidney Eckerd attempted to board a streetcar. The conductor, a man named Mr. Rivers, told the men to get off, and they refused. And so the conductor summoned a policeman who repeated the order. But then the crowd came, and these two men were arrested and taken to the local guardhouse into police custody. Rumors spread throughout the black community. And contrary to popular belief, black folks in those days were not all docile and living in fear of the Klan and things of that sort. Many of these black folks weren't playing. They went to those streetcars and got buck wild. They started throwing bricks through the streetcars, one injuring a white lady in the head, and a black youth named Andrew Brown was found to have bricks and rocks in his pockets and throwing at them. So anyway, a massive amount of soldiers and police came to arrest this crowd of black people, and some black people were even trying to, get this, derail the cars by putting stones onto the tracks. Like I said, these folks were no joke. The Charleston Daily News of April the 2nd, 1867 called all of this disgraceful and suggested this was a preconcerted scheme on the part of the Negroes to force their way into the cars. Well, anyway, a few days after this, on April the 17th, 1867, there was a black lady of considerable education and refinement by the name of Mary Bowers. She actually went on the streetcar, and the conductor said, "You can't ride on the streetcar," and she said, "Why not?" And the streetcar conductor said, "Because you are not well." Apparently she was coughing. And so she looked around and said, "Is there a doctor on this car?" And one physician said he was, and she said, "Do you think I am not well enough to ride this streetcar?" The doctor said she was, and she says, "Does anybody object to me sitting on the streetcar?" And the passengers agreed, no, they didn't. And so then this argument continued until the man demanded his money back. He said, "I'm getting late. I'm hungry. I need to go home to get my dinner." And then another woman said, the child I'm minding is also hungry. My child needs to eat." And so the physician said, "Miss Bowers, you are too dignified a lady to have this type of confrontation." So she said, "As I am detaining these gentlemen on their business, and the children are hungry, I will leave the car, but for no other reason. But if there is any way," and she said to the conductor, "I will make you pay for it." Whoa. She wrote a letter to General Robert K. Scott, who at that time was over the Freedmen's Bureau in South Carolina and would eventually become the Reconstruction Governor of South Carolina. And she also wrote a letter in the Charleston Daily News of May the 6th, 1867, telling this story. Governor Scott got in contact with John Riggs, who was president of the Charleston City Railway Company. And so then Riggs discussed the issue with the board of directors, and so they said, "Okay, the cars are open to whoever wishes to ride." And that led to the integration of the streetcars. Thanks to Mary Bowers, a story found in these old issues of the Charleston Daily News and the Charleston Daily Courier back in 1867. But hold up, some of you might ask. Wait, so how did they get segregated again? Here's what happened. In 1883, the Supreme Court ruled that business owners had the right to say who they wanted and who they didn't want to serve. In 1895, South Carolina enacted the Jim Crow Constitution, which I discussed in another one of these videos, which led to segregation and the denial of black people's right to vote, as well as beginning the practice of segregated schools. And in 1896, the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that separate but equal was no violation of the constitutional rights. But as we all know, the people got plenty of separate and no equal, which led to that being overturned by the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, and eventually the Civil Rights Movement led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that ended segregation once and for all. But it's important to know that when these things were passed, there was resistance. And that's a story that we can all be proud of. This story is told in my book, Voices of Black South Carolina, and this is Damon Fordham.